Monster Guys present a Yokai podcast presentation, bringing to life, through short stories and informative discussion, the strange, the beautiful, the whimsical, and the mystery of Japanese yokai.
Now please enjoy a story about
the Kuchisake Onna, and a story titled The Beauty of Vengeance, written by C. Michael McGannon, narrated by D.C. McGannon, presented by the Monster Guys.
It was strange that the merchant and his wife had been married, and successful, for as long as they had. The two were vain beyond measure. The merchant being caught up with his own social and entrepreneurial success, the wife bound by her incomparable beauty. One's wealth complemented the other's grace, both of which were eclipsed only by their pride. They kept both social and professional interactions at an arm's length, adding to their image of mystique and sophistication. This served to bring them even more good fortune in time. The merchant decided it was time for them to relocate beyond the borders of their quaint town where they resided, building a small palace well within convenient access by horseback to the town and its market. This was favorable for the merchant to continue building his business, yet far enough removed to enjoy the peace and quiet away from prying neighbors' eyes. "Do you think I'm pretty?" she would ask him some nights by the lamplight of their masterfully designed garden. Her husband would answer with a hearty yes, followed by playful laughter. It was the first question she had ever asked him, and had grown to be something of an inside joke between the couple. It was a lovely exchange between them, but only for a season. Eventually, the wife grew bored. Before moving beyond the gates of the town, she had been involved in several social activities and surrounded herself regularly with the joys of casual friendship. Here now, in the country, she grew easily bored when her husband left for the daily addiction that was his work. Bored and lonely. From time to time, other merchants and tradesmen would visit while the husband was at home relaxing to inquire about the state of business or some new deal being negotiated. The merchant's wife caught the eye of more than one of these visitors, and as her self-worth diminished against the backdrop of her husband's ever-growing success, more than one caught her eye as well. It wasn't long before one happened to stop by when the husband was not around, and she seized her opportunity to seduce the visitor. They sullied the house with their infidelity, but the wife, no stranger to the town's gossip, was quite good at keeping her secrets. She invited her prey to return, and her boredom quickly gave way to this new game. And so it continued. The husband would leave, and the wife and her lover would frolic, until one day the husband returned earlier than usual. The adulterous couple was caught red-handed. The moonlighting merchant fled in disgrace, never to return again. And as for the wife, she levied her insults at her husband in defense of her emotional state, accusing him of being neglectful and choosing his work over her. In a moment of rage, the influential businessman took his beautiful wife by her hair and fashioned a blade against her face. After a brief struggle, he pinned her down and dragged his knife through her cheeks, tattooing a horrid, bloody gash of a smile across her once porcelain skin. "Who will think you are pretty now?" he cried in his frenzy. When he saw what he had done, he was regretful, but cast her from his sight. Life went on. The merchant and his wife both broken in their own way. His business dwindled, his own regret and shame eating at him, and the memory of his wife with another man deepening his bitterness with each passing day. As for the once handsome and radiating bride, she teased the brink of insanity. She had known unmatched beauty her entire life, the influence of her smile magnificent. Even after she was able to remove her bandages, she was frightening to look upon, as evidenced by her husband's business callers. They would see her and recoil, their eyes growing wide with shock, fear almost, disgust. Finally, she could no longer live with the burden, with the gentle fancy of an evening's jasmine breeze. As her husband sat in their garden contemplating, she snuck up behind him, caressing his shoulders lightly. As the merchant relaxed and yielded to her endearment, she pulled his blade from the side of his robe, screaming, "Do you think I'm pretty?" plunging the knife forward. The merchant was able to wrestle the knife away, though, and tried to restrain her. Like a demon, she possessed great strength, however, and resorted to clawing at the man's face in her wrath. The husband snapped and used the knife to end the attack. As the knife sunk deep into her stomach, the wife leaned forward, whispering, angry, "Do you think I'm pretty now?" The house of the merchant was soon rumored to be a place of unbearable sadness. Hate grew where love once kept its throne. As his business dwindled, fewer and fewer traders risked visiting the merchant, as hearsay spread through the nearby town. Where had the wife gone? Why did the merchant look more like a madman each day? Why was his house and garden falling into such rapid disrepair? As time passed, the people of the town left the merchant to his own devices. He became estranged, his hard-earned career in ruin. The merchant gave up, a man at the end of his rope. Then, and only then, did the culprit show herself. One night, the merchant lay in his overgrown garden, weeping to the sky. His wife appeared to him dressed in rich clothing, and a sash winding coy around her face. The husband could hardly believe it and ran to her, apologizing, asking her to come back to him, begging. "Do you think I'm pretty?" she recited softly in his ear. The husband laughed, a desperate man. "Yes," he answered. The woman ripped the sash away from her face, revealing the bloody, crooked grin carved into her cheeks. "Do you think I'm pretty?" The husband fell back, realizing the truth of his wife's appearance. She was a vengeful ghost, and he was her murderer. She held a knife, and the husband could only watch, weak and unresponsive, as she raised it high above her head. 2 slashes, inhumanly fast, cut deep red lines into the merchant's face. She didn't stop there. In the breath of several moments, the merchant was released painfully from his wretched existence, the culmination of vanity and wrath finally taking its toll. The slit-mouthed woman stood in the courtyard, lost. Her murderer was dead, but she was not satisfied. Even in death, her image would never again be beautiful, and she craved that feeling again, but knew it would never come. Tucking her knife into her sleeve and wrapping her face in the sash, the slit-mouthed woman walked toward the lights of the town, and it wasn't long before she passed a lonely traveler on the path. She walked up to him and giggled, asking him a simple question. "Do you think I'm pretty?"
Well, that was a bit of a dark and sad story.
It was a sad story, and the story of the Kuchisake Onna is a very sad story indeed.
It is, and it's actually pretty common. There are quite a few stories in older Japan that wives are murdered either for infidelity or just simply because they happen to be with a very abusive merchant or samurai husband at the time, depending on which story you're going with. But it's actually a common motif in Japanese folklore.
Yeah, it is, and this particular legend has historical roots, but also kind of shows its face on the modern canvas.
It does. Going beyond folklore, the Kuchisake Onna, or the slit-mouthed woman, is one of Japan's biggest, or at least over in the West, it's one of the most well-known urban legends to this day. We'll have more to say on her in the future because she is a pretty big icon.
Yeah, and we do want to devote an episode of the Monster Guys podcast to this legend.
Yeah, but while she is a very classic figure, her image and her habits have changed and evolved over the years to match modern times. So it's fascinating to watch in the midst of all of these other items that come to life, like the wooden sandals that come to life, and the kitsune and the tanuki, and how they still exist in their almost ancient forms, if you will, in modern day. Mm-hmm. The Kuchisake Onna has changed her image to stay up to date with the rest of us.
Yeah, I think I read, and maybe it was on Matthew Meyer's this blog, yokai.com, how the Kuchisake Onna at one time in history was considered to be the kitsune. And then further down the line, it became known as a vengeful ghost. Then, of course, today even we have this modern urban legend surrounding this figure. And so there's not just been an update of image through the years, but also a shift and a change in the understanding and the approach to this character throughout the years. So that to me is very interesting. This story ended kind of where the legend picks up.
Yes.
Explain to me a little bit, because we find a lot of stories on lonely paths in Japan, and this one is no different. And what we find as far as the legend is concerned is that most people encounter her on a lonely path. And then there's a series of questions that take place, which is the legend of the Kuchisake Onna.
Historically, it's just that one encounter that we typically see of the slit-mouthed woman. It's where she walks up, her face is covered by a fan or a sash, or if it's in a modern-day setting, her face is covered by like a surgical mask. And there is a reason behind that. But she'll walk up to somebody with the lower half of her face covered, and she will ask them, "Do you think I'm pretty?" They may answer yes or no. If they answer yes, she'll take the mask or the sash or the fan away from her face and reveal the slits going from her cheeks to her ears.
Right, the cuts, the gashes.
The Glasgow smile, basically. And if they answer yes again, then she will let them go. But then when they reach home, she'll murder them on their doorstep with a knife.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Absolutely lovely.
If you answer no when she takes the mask off, then she'll just kill you right then and there. And most of the time, she leaves the same type of smile on your face.
There's just no escaping this woman. It's like if you encounter her, I'm sure your heart just begins to pound because you're done, and you know you're done.
Well, there is an escape. There are a few escapes.
Okay. Please tell me the escape so that we can...
We'll go with one for today, and we'll leave the rest for later. But the traditional way is saying that she looks so-so. So when she rips the mask away and reveals her horrid nature, instead of answering yes out of nervousness or no out of honest fear, if you're clever, you might think to say, so-so. And if you do this, it will confuse her long enough for you to walk away and escape.
So it's the one time where you're straddling the fence actually saves your life.
Hey, I might survive that one.
Okay.
Yeah, but there is a way out. It's not something that I think anybody would think of in that moment of life or death.
Yeah.
You're going to think either yes or no.
If you're in fight or flight, you're thinking extremes.
Yes.
And there are other ways, like you said, to escape or deter, and we'll cover those in the future. But it's very interesting that you can just take a medium, middle of the road answer and have a chance to survive.
While writing this story, I was thinking over some of the points that Zach Davison brought up in our recent interview on the Monster Guys podcast about Mirei, and how Japanese ghosts, typically, a lot of the time, they are created out of the final desire, the final yearning, or the final thought that a person dies with.
Right.
Something that's always confused me about some of these monsters in Japan is that they seem to go after the wicked and the innocent alike. Mm-hmm. So if you're on a lonely path, you may actually be trying to stop and help somebody, and you'll still get killed.
Right.
And that always...
sucks to be you.
Yeah. That always fascinated me, that there's not really, good versus evil. You're dead. And I think this story, I was trying to help explain why she would do that. She was left with that final desire to still be beautiful in the midst of rage and depression.
Yeah.
So she, even in death, was lashing out at whoever she would meet.
Yep. And that interview with Zach was a brilliant conversation. I'd encourage anybody to go back to the Monster Guys podcast. I think it was episode 17.
It's probably one of my favorite episodes that we've done so far, to be honest.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, and he took us deep into the subject of Yurei, the Japanese ghost, and gave us some great explanation, great insight. So that would go right along with our conversation here about the Kuchisake Onna. Again, one more of those brutal figures in Japanese folklore. We're going to have to find some happy ones somewhere along the way.
I have a couple ideas.
Yeah, but it was good. It's a good conversation, and there's a lot more to cover with her, and we will do that in the future. I do hope you've enjoyed this episode of our Yokai podcast. As always, you can find us at themonsterguys.com or on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just type in The Monster Guys, and we'll be there waiting with open arms. We love to hear from you and love to talk with you. Thanks again for hanging out with us tonight.
See you next time.